What is up, guys? Welcome to another video, and today we are doing another review. We are taking a look at Hasbro Star Wars The Black Series ARC Trooper, but we all know who this is. This is Fordo. This was released for the 50th anniversary of Lucasfilms, alongside with a series of other Clone Wars recreated figures like General Grievous and Mace Windu, and obviously we got our boy Fordo, but unfortunately he was just titled ARC Trooper. Don't know why they did that. To this day, that's a mystery to all of us, but this figure has been out for quite a while now, and I'm just happy to finally have him in my collection and add him to my Clone Trooper shelf. And because I have him, I said fuck it, and we are going to review him. But before we actually dig into the figure, we all know what time it is. It's time to jump into that lore, and if you don't like the lore segments of the video, that's fine. There are chapters in the description below, so you can skip right to the figure review. So with all that said, let's jump into Fordo's lore. So for the unfortunate few who do not know who Captain Fordo is, he is an ARC Trooper who appeared in the 2003-5 Star Wars Clone Wars Cartoon Network series. Though much isn't known about Captain Fordo himself, as we see throughout the Clone Wars series, he has pulled off many feats and missions to make him the best of the best amongst his brothers. This man has survived the crash of his LAAT. He's made General Grievous retreat. I should say fall back or held back Grievous, because if I use the word retreat, a couple Grievous fanboys in the comment section will lose their goddamn minds. But I'm Team Fordo over Grievous any day of the week, get mad. And one last feat I should mention is that Fordo became the front line. During the Battle of Coruscant, clones were falling left and right to separatist forces, so Fordo took his rifle and his pistol, and when the line fell, he stood up and became the fucking line, and the absolute unit he was, he held that goddamn line. And besides those three examples, there are many other feats and missions that Fordo has tackled and completed successfully, as seen throughout the 2003-5 show and throughout the comics that were released while the show ran. But despite Fordo being considered the Doomslayer of the Clone Troopers, he did not serve alone. He served alongside his squad called the Molinist 10. The squad was made up of various ARC Troopers and regular Clone Troopers, and how they got their name was from the Battle of Molinist, where they had to go on a mission to shut down some cannons, and because their mission was a success, they got the name the Molinist 10. And during the first half of the Clone Wars, Fordo would serve alongside the Molinist 10, but as we see towards the end of the Clone Wars, where their Phase 2 armor was being shown, we don't really see the Molinist 10 serve alongside Fordo, unfortunately. And we never really get to learn the fate of those ARC Troopers and regular Clone Troopers that served in the Molinist 10. All we know is that Fordo survived up until the end of the Clone Wars. We don't know if he lived or died to see Order 66, but that is all we know so far. And with all that being said, we can now jump into the figure review. So looking at the packaging here, we have a replica of the 2005 packaging that the original Fordo figure came in, and here's just a look at the back, a brief description of the ARC Troopers with some art and a timeline of the Star Wars franchise and where he would fit in. So this is a very cool box. And getting into articulation, Fordo can rotate his head 360 degrees and look up and down a pretty good amount, enough to show some kind of expression, and he can tilt his head side to side, but it doesn't really want to stay. You can move his head side to side, so he can move his head back and forth and rotate it 360 degrees, which is always good to see. Getting to the arm articulation, he can bring his arms up a good amount, and then you can of course rotate them 360 degrees for your rotating needs. The forearm and elbow articulation is kind of iffy in my opinion. When trying to bring his forearm up, you can't really bring it up all the way. The armor does clash with itself, so I guess realistically it does bring up the forearm as much as he can. And then getting to the wrist and hand articulation, this guy can rotate his hand 360 degrees as every other figure can, and the wrist articulation is really good. You can bend his wrist a good amount. And then getting to the torso articulation on our boy, he can do somewhat of a crunch, so he can bring his torso back and forth and rotate it 360 degrees for your articulating needs. And then getting to the legs, he can do a half butt kick. He can't really bring it up all the way, but he can bend his knee back for running or kneeling poses. And then getting to the splits, he can't really do a split, but that's more because his comma is in the way. So, you know, he does kind of limit himself in that regard. And then moving to the feet articulation, there isn't really any when it comes to the swivel, but you can bend his feet back and forth. So you can't really move or swivel his feet side to side, but you can push them back and forth. And then of course you can rotate his lower calf 360 degrees. So overall, pretty good articulation for a Black Series figure. And Fordo here does come with a handful of blasters, starting off with the DC-15A. This isn't anything new. We've seen this a bunch of times with a bunch of Black Series releases, so I'm not going to put it on the turntable, but I still figure I would show it off to you guys. And for our second blaster, we have the DC-15A Carbine. Just like the DC-15A, we've seen this 100 times with Black Series releases, but because it is an accessory, I figured I would show it off. And for the final blaster slash blasters, we get a pair of DC-17s, and like I said, we've seen this also 100 times with Black Series releases, but you know, as an accessory included, I must show it off to let you know what this product comes with. So before we get to the turntable segment of the video and I essentially just give my thoughts about the figure, I wanted to go over a topic, or at least cover something about this figure. And before that, even, this figure is very controversial amongst the community of the Black Series wave, because this figure is very inaccurate when it comes to design. People were very upset with how lazy Hasbro was when it came to this release, because all they really did was take the Echo body and put a Fordo head on the figure, and essentially not, you know, making him screen accurate at all, because there's a difference between the ARC Trooper we see in 2003 and 5 and the ARC Trooper we've seen throughout the Clone Wars and Battlefront 2, believe it or not. So I just want to go over some comparing, contrasting, and the inaccuracies that Hasbro had when it came to making this figure. Jumping straight into the comparison, like I said, Fordo just uses Echo's body. They have the same torso, arms, legs, comma, and pauldron. The only difference between these figures is their paint job and their head. So that is one thing that many people were upset about when it came to this Fordo figure. But one thing I want to address before I start ripping into the figure's inaccuracies when it comes to the design is that I understand that Hasbro's goal with the Black Series figures is to translate them into, you know, what a live action iteration of the figure would look like, because we have Clone Wars figures from the comics, and Hasbro has done their best job to translate the art style that they're from into what a on-screen live action appearance would look like. And I understand that the 2003 and 5, you know, art style is very, you know, exaggerated. It's very different than the art style that, you know, Black Series is going for. So the translation between the two always might not be the easiest, but that still doesn't excuse Hasbro for reusing assets and just having parts on the figure that shouldn't even be there or are just in the wrong spot. So just wanted to put that out there, that the translation between art styles might not always be the smoothest, but I still want to, you know, give my, you know, pointers and thoughts on the inaccuracies of this figure, because it does not excuse Hasbro for just reusing parts and adding parts of the figure that shouldn't even be there. So yeah, let's rip into this figure's design now. So starting off with a Fordo's pauldron, if we look at the 2003 style, his pauldron is one round piece with the pouches on the gray side of the pauldron, where if we look at the Black Series figure, it seems like it's more of 2 pieces or 3 pieces even, and it's not really round, it's more sharp and has edge to it, and the pouches are on the wrong side of the pauldron. Then moving down to the chest, if we look at 2003 Fordo, he has just a normal clone chest rig, and if we look at the figure of Fordo, he has that metal plating that ARC Troopers now do have, and they just painted it white rather than removing it. So if we take a look at the back of 2003 Fordo, we see that there is no backpack because his pauldron takes up that space of his back. But if we look at the figure of Fordo, there is space there because of the new ARC Trooper pauldrons, so he does have a backpack. And moving down to the legs, if we take a look at the 2003 Fordo, he just has normal clone legs, nothing crazy going on with his armor or anything. But if we look at the figure, we can tell that the ARC Trooper plating on the legs is there. It is just painted white to, you know, try and hide it. And then moving to the comma, comparing 2003 Fordo to the figure, the comma is pretty much the same, nothing wrong there. But if we take a look at 2003 Fordo's accessories around his belt, he has just holsters and then a normal clone belt, where if we look at the figure, there is a normal clone belt there, but there's more than just holsters going on. There's straps, there's extra pouches, and the holsters aren't the normal long holsters that Fordo has. These are the DC-17 holsters that we see on the new ARC Troopers. And the final thing that has most fans disappointed about the inaccuracies is the blaster pistols that do come with the figure Fordo. In the 2003 series, Fordo had these iconic, I don't know if they're DC-17s or what, but these iconic handgun blasters that were very cool looking. He kind of made them his own, and that's what he was known for using. And when we got the figure from Hasbro, they decided to stick with the DC-17s, then giving him his iconic blasters, and that did bum out a lot of people, including myself. One last thing I want to go over when it comes to discussing this figure's inaccuracies, and it's that some may defend this figure by saying that this is a modern iteration of Fordo. This is Hasbro's take on what Fordo would look like if he was in the Clone Wars series, like Season 7, or if he was in a movie or anything like that. And, yeah, maybe this is what he would look like, but even they got that wrong. And what I mean by that is the armor plating on his torso and legs. All ARC Troopers have that armor plating painted gray because it's armor plating. It's not actually like part of their white clone armor. It's something they put on. And on this figure, it's painted white as if it was just, there. They're just trying to cover it up by painting it white. So even if this was a modern iteration of Fordo, they got that wrong because they painted the plating white instead of gray like it should be. So is this a modern iteration of Fordo, or is Hasbro being lazy and just reusing the Echo body because he is an ARC Trooper and just slapping a Fordo head on him for a quick cash grab? Personally, I think that this is a cash grab, because if this was a retelling of Fordo and his design, I feel like they would have made that very clear, but they didn't. They're just like, hey, remember these old figures that we released? Well, we're releasing them in 6-inch Black Series scale, and yeah, and we just got a very inaccurate one because they wanted to reuse the Echo body. But that's personally how I feel. If you want to tell me how you feel down in the comments below, you're more than welcome to do that. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say about the inaccuracies of this figure and why this is right now probably one of the more controversial figures throughout the Black Series. Despite already using turntable footage, we are now at the turntable segment of the video where I give my opinions on the figure and just overall thoughts, pros, cons, and all that. And I know we just went on a whole segment about the inaccuracies of this figure and my opinion on that, but I only really have one other problem with this figure, and it has to do nothing with the character design but more of the actual figure design itself, and that is with his left hand. He has two pistols, so he's implied that he's going to dual wield, and on his right hand he has a trigger finger, but on his left hand he does not, so it looks really weird when he holds the pistol. So of course I had to go ahead and fix that myself, and the pistol fits perfectly in his hand, and I kind of wish that Hasbro would accommodate the figures that dual wield with two trigger finger hands instead of just one. So after complaining the inaccuracies of this figure's character design and the left hand not having a trigger finger, what are some things that I actually like about this figure? So starting off with the articulation. The articulation isn't 1,000 Toys quality by any means, but I do think that this is good articulation for a Black Series figure. I like the feel of the articulation in all his limbs, the torso, and the head. The only real iffy complaint that I have, and this is more nitpicking, is with the forearms, because I wish he could bring his forearms up more, but the only reason they don't go up as much as I wish they would is because the armor is clashing with itself. Another thing that I actually really like about this figure is the amount of accessories he comes with. He comes with two blaster pistols, a carbine, and a rifle, and that's a lot of accessories for one figure. Usually a figure comes with 1 or 2 blasters, where we have 4. Granted, 2 were required at the minimum because he needs those 2 blaster pistols. So that's what I really do like about the figure. And just taking it back to a more neutral tone, one thing that I would have been all for with this figure is if they were like, hey, this release is going to be a modern take of Fordo, but because they painted white over the armor plating, I think they were just being lazy, but that's my opinion. But if they were just like, hey, this is a modern recreation of Fordo, I would have been all for it. Yeah, I would have been bummed out that we weren't getting a 2003 version of Fordo, but it would have been more understanding on why we got a Fordo that looks more like this. On I'm also envious of the 3 3/4 inch Black Series figures, because they actually did get a very accurate looking Fordo, and I wish the 6-inch series would get that kind of love, but we won't, so it's alright, I guess. I just wish that they were like, hey, modern take, or give us a more accurate version of Fordo. But enough with the accuracies and whatnot. Overall, I think that this is a cool looking figure nonetheless, because I'm very happy that Fordo is getting some kind of love, because, you know, the 2003 and 5 series, in my opinion, doesn't get talked about enough. At least it's not as much as it used to. And, you know, I'm just happy to see Fordo getting some love, whether it's an inaccurate figure or not. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this figure. And with all that said, I really hope you enjoyed the video. I know I had a really good time making this video. I actually felt like I had a discussion with you guys despite speaking into a microphone, and it was just really cool going down memory lane, looking into the lore of one of my favorite clones, because I did grow up with this era of Star Wars as a kid. And it was just, I love Fordo. He's one of my favorite clones. There's such a badass seeing a clone that was different from the rest. It was just something that was so cool. And yeah, I really tore into the design of this figure, and I think that's a part of it, is just because how passionate and just how much I adore Fordo as a character. It's just, you know, I wish that they'd done him a little more justice. But like I said, you know, had a fun time making this video. It felt very productive. It felt like, you know, I had a discussion with you guys. And if you want to keep this discussion going, go down to the comments below and talk about how you feel about this figure. But if you don't want to comment, I get it. It's a lot of effort, so don't worry about it. But if you did like this video, a like and a subscription would be awesome. And we both know the bell's broken, so don't worry about that. And I got more reviews like this on the channel, so if you want to go check those out, more than welcome to. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you later.